Welcome to the GM on MNG podcast. I'm Gordy. I'm here with Michael. We are the Calgary Flames division of the SB Nation group of sites, and we're here on trade deadline day. It's an exciting day in the NHL. We're here at 12:55 Mountain Time, so about 5 minutes before the end. We thought we'd get some live reaction to stuff that may go down still, and get some reactions to stuff that has gone down. So. Yeah, so what have you felt about today?
I think it's been an interesting day. We were kind of expecting it to be a buyer's market this year with so many teams out of it, but like based on some of the prices we've seen, I don't think that's quite materialized to the effect we were thinking it was going to. Yeah, I guess kind of just from a Flames perspective, it's been at least so far all quiet, but as we're getting down at these last few minutes, there's often like 15 trades for some reason right after the deadline. So still waiting for a depth piece on that end, but yeah, so far I'm feeling pretty good. Other than they losing Brad Richardson, like the whole team's going to fall into chaos now without Brad Richardson around.
Yeah, there seems to be a little bit of like um, polarizing opinions on Richardson. Half the fan base is really happy to see him go, which I mean it's kind of based off his production this year. But there's another side like you who feel that he was kind of a big locker room piece, and kind of losing anybody at this point is kind of detrimental. I'm kind of on the side of he's off the books now. He's not a huge loss, but you're right. We don't see what goes on in the room, and he seems like a personable guy. Guys really got along with him, and clearly there's a reason Vancouver reclaimed him. That he's been on the Canucks before.
Yeah, definitely. I don't know. I don't think it's gonna be a. I don't think you're gonna notice anything on the ice with his departure. I just wonder if he's like one of those guys in the room, like one of the veteran guys that everyone kind of liked and kind of was just there. But at the end of the day, he's like a 14th forward on a good team, so it's a spot that's opened up, and I still think we might see someone come in to replace him now that he's out. Like I
Mhm.
don't think they just waived him for no reason. Like I wonder if there was some kind of potential deal in place. Yeah, just kind of looking at things like it looks like Tyler Mott just got traded to the Rangers, and he was kind of a player I hoped that the Flames would be looking at on like kind of a depth ad. But yeah, no, beyond that, I think we are gonna get into this, but I'm kind of glad the Flames did their shopping early. Obviously, they got Calle Jarnkrok last week, just ahead of or just after we finished our podcast, and Tyler Toffoli before that. Like, I think gotta look back now in hindsight that Tyler Toffoli is looking like a really good trade after some of the other values we've seen of late.
Yeah, it's like at this point, I don't know what the price for anything is. It's basically teams seem to be like discussing prices for guys, and whatever the price is, they're paying it. There's not really any consistency, but like not only the fact that they got Tyler Toffoli for what they did, but how early they got him before this deadline. Like they were able to see how he fit in. He's obviously scored at probably a higher rate than anybody could have hoped for. And that added time he's had with the Flames and their ability to kind of plan around that, like paying whatever if Heineman is kind of the extra addition to that package to get him earlier. Like I think it's well worth it at this point. And even Jarnkrok going a couple days early before this really weird couple days here. Like if you had to pay a little more to get these deals done before this, like I think it's worth it. They've both looked good with the Flames. They fit their systems well, and Brad doesn't have to worry about a panic move or a reactionary move today, because if he does absolutely nothing, he's made his bolstering moves up until this point.
Yeah, exactly. I felt like, especially like the Yarncrook deal, like there were other teams obviously in the hunt for him, but maybe doing that extra little bit to get it done early. Other teams might feel like, oh, there's going to be other options. They might be more willing to kind of back down on things. If he was still with Seattle right now and the teams were kind of fighting it out down these final like couple hours, like you could have seen that. I wouldn't have been shocked to see that price jump as high as like a first or something for him, just based on it's what it seemed like the number of teams that were involved in that trade. Yeah, and like you said, he looks like he's been a really good fit so far. He kind of just has seamlessly kind of come into the lineup, and then yeah, getting back to Toffoli, like he's been close to a point per game with the Flames, or right around there, like his whole time. And to get that kind of value plus his term on a reasonable like cap hit, like it looks really good in hindsight, especially when you're seeing Like I know Brandon Hagel's a good player, but like I didn't realize he's suddenly better than Jack Eichel or something. Like my goodness, like 2 firsts and 2 prospects for him was a pretty ridiculous trade that kind of got the last couple of days going here when he went from the Hawks to Lightning. But have there been any other like kind of big trades you've been stunned by over the last maybe like 72 hours?
Yeah, it's almost like they're almost like basketball trades at a certain point where we're getting like some 2024, 2025 draft picks thrown in. It's kind of bizarre. Like, I don't know. That Claude Giroux deal that went down is probably the biggest forward trade other than Toffoli that's happened since the Flames got him. And I just feel so bad for the Flyers because they were in such a lose-lose scenario. It gave me like flashbacks to the Flames getting ready to get rid of Iginla because, no matter what Claude Giroux is worth, like they were handcuffed by who he wanted to go to, and it's just such an underwhelming package. Like for the Panthers to get him for that little is, I mean, it's insane, but it's not due to some great dealings. It's kind of like I said, a handcuff situation. Other than that, we talked about it a little bit when it happened, but like the Flames traded Brett Kulak for two replacement level AHL defensemen 4 years ago now because they didn't want to go to arbitration with Kulak. And, a couple of years later, he's going for a second round pick and a better defenseman than either of the two he was initially traded for. I mean, awesome for Kulak to, I guess, have that kind of value put on him. Really good trade for the Canadians who have made some, I think, really good moves in the last couple days. But wow, like really a rare case of bad asset management by Treliving when it came to Kulak. Like he never looked that bad with Calgary. He had only been going up. Really, the value he was looking for in arbitration wasn't insane, especially with probably his value now. So yeah, I was curious to hear about your thoughts on that trade as well.
Yeah, like it seems kind of like a strange trade for the Oilers to bring him in for like a second Lagesson, who I think at worst is kind of like a fringe NHLer, like a
Mhm.
670, and then to throw a second on top of that, like that just kind of seems like peak Ken Holland. Like I know Kulak, he had a few good years in Montreal, but like he hasn't been great this year. So like
Mhm.
I was kind of expecting him to go kind of closer to like maybe like a second by itself or like a third and a fourth kind of range. Yeah, kind of going back to that Flames trade, it was weird at the time, like to get two basically AHL defensemen that spent 1 year with the club pretty much and then were jettisoned. Like, yeah, I don't think anyone liked it at the time. It seemed like it was almost just like I don't want to say like a spite thing, but just like they had the
Mhm.
arbitration. It must have gotten a little bit ugly and the relationship was kind of done after that. Yeah, it's just interesting to see like where he's kind of going to fit in on the Oilers too. Obviously, he's from Edmonton, and like Edmonton loves their local guys. So yeah, I thought another trade that was interesting involving a former Flames defenseman that I didn't understand yesterday was like Travis Hamnick. Like I don't know why Ottawa paid a third just to get him. Like I know they need to get to their like cap floor and stuff, but like I thought you could have got him for like future considerations, honestly. Like Vancouver, it seemed like they've been pretty eager to get him off the books pretty much from the day they extended him. So I don't really know where Ottawa's fitting in on that, especially with the whole like Hamnick didn't want to play out east thing when he originally before he got traded to Calgary, and now he's in Ottawa of all places. So it just seemed like a very strange trade, like across the board yesterday, and kind of caught everyone off guard. Yeah, I don't know. Do you want to talk maybe about Mark Giordano getting a chance with his hometown team? Like, what are your feelings on that?
Yeah, just to touch on the Hamonic thing too, like he's clearly got like some kind of psychological hold over GMs because Calgary way overpaid for him when they acquired him. Vancouver gave him way too big of a contract, and then like you said, somebody paid assets to get him with another year. Like it's mind-boggling at this point. He must be, just an insanely good guy to get that kind of value. But yeah, Mark Giordano is kind of an interesting story now. Like they have to pair him with TJ Brody, right? Like there's no other option. Like they absolutely have to. It's an interesting move. I never really wanted the Flames to acquire him, and we've known for a while now that especially with the expansion rules to do with retaining salary, like there was realistically no chance he was coming back. I feel bad for him because he's been a little sheltered in Seattle. It's kind of tough to get an accurate read on how he's playing at the moment because he's just on such an abysmal team, and he is 38 years old. Like, he is going to be put into a top four role right away with Toronto, and they're very likely to overextend him and put him on power play time. And we saw him get overused in Calgary maybe his last year here. So I don't know. It's always nice to see people get to play for their hometowns, and he's clearly excited. And the Leafs have a legitimate playoff worthy roster that could do some damage. So happy for Giordano. It's quite a steep price, like even without the contract issues. And if the Flames would have been able to fit him, like I would not have paid that much to acquire Giordano at this point. So yeah, how about you? What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I'm in the same place. Like the price didn't make sense. Like obviously the expansion things pretty much made it a non-option off the hop. I'm really glad they didn't pay a first and a third in the summer to keep him around. Like
Mhm.
that, just even his cap space just let the Flames do so much more this like in the offseason in this season. Yeah, I'm wishing the best for him. I think I don't know. There seemed to be a sentiment that like Flames fans would be pretty pissed off that he was going to Toronto, and honestly, I found like at least personally, I just didn't really care. Like,
Yeah.
good for him. I'm happy. Like, it'll be nice for him to play at home. Like, he's got a lot of family out there. I don't know. I'm hoping for the best, but it's the Leafs. They never seem to come in the playoffs, so I think we're just gonna watch them kind of do their same thing, regardless of with Giordano or not, and then I don't know where things end up in the offseason with him either. I don't know if the Flames kick tires on him if they need another
Mhm.
bottom pairing guy coming back. Like maybe they explore that, but at this point I just think kind of things are too far along with the Flames kind of progressing past the Giordano era that it might not make sense to even bring him back then. Yeah, I'm kind of just with it. It's just again, it's a trade that both teams got what they want. Obviously, like Toronto got like a big name along with Colin Blackwell, who's a decent depth guy. And yeah, Seattle has about pretty much every pick in the next two drafts at this rate. Like I think they've got 11 or 12 unless they've made any more trades this year, and like
Mhm.
I think another 10 or 11 the year after. Like if they can scout, they might get some good guys, but we'll see on that, and that's always the hardest part of having picks.
Like, who is Seattle gonna ice the rest of the season at this point? Like, they're pretty stingy on depth, like on a nightly basis, and they've shipped out a good chunk of their defensive depth at this point. They've shipped out a couple forwards. Like, they've still got Jared McCann and Yanni Gourde at forward, but other than that, like, we are gonna see a lot of weird bodies in Seattle these next couple weeks. They are not going to be a good team.
Yeah, it's hard to believe they're going to be worse, but like I still don't know what their game plan was like putting that team
Mm,
together this year because like I know they kind of talked about like having the cap flexibility going forward to do things, but I think they're what like four or five guys at least off their roster by now who they got in the expansion draft. And like, yes, they're getting some good picks for him, like Jeremy Lazon for a
mhm.
second. Like, they just look like they're going to be a team that's going to have a lot of picks this year. And I'm guessing they'll probably flip some of those picks into actual like NHL players. But man, like I just don't see where they were kind of what they were going to kind of do to put a team together. Because like looking at what's left on their roster now, it looks like a team that if you were in like NHL 22 and like every 15 players you'd add that player to create a team, that's what you'd kind of like end up with. Like
Yeah.
there's just no like you can't really see like an identity there. You can't really see like a style. Like obviously they don't have a captain anymore either. It's just a mess right there. And like they'll get pieces to kind of round things up, but they're not a team for me that's going to be at least scary for probably 2 more years, if not more. Just it just doesn't look like an NHL team even anymore. I guess another trade we want to, or I want to at least delve into a bit, was like Marc-Andre Fleury suddenly kind of just ending up in Minnesota out of nowhere, which wasn't a team that you really thought was going to look for a goaltender. Like they had Talbot and they had Capo
Mhm.
Kakinen, who they obviously flipped to the Sharks after that. But man, like again, I've beaten this drum a few times like over the course of the season, but like Edmonton could have had the reigning Vezina winner for free in the summer, use the money on Duncan
Mhm.
Keith and Mike Smith, and now Chicago got him for nothing, and then they got a second, possibly a first out of the deal if Minnesota goes on a bit of a run. So what are your thoughts on MAF joining Minnesota?
Yeah, it's a trade where like there was a period where Minnesota was really good at the start of this year and both their goalies were playing at the same caliber, but like these last few weeks Talbot has just lost the faith of that team completely. He's turned into a three goals a game guy, and Kakinen has been a really touted prospect there for a while, but being passed over by the Kraken in the expansion draft, I mean, kind of maybe put a label on what teams thought of him. Fleury is just such a weird story because like he was traded for nothing from Vegas, as we talked about last time, and now he's getting a potential first round pick in return. Like Vegas's management of their own guys is very bizarre. I think, Minnesota is good enough defensively, and they have kind of a track record of rehabbing goalies. We all saw what they did with Devin Dubnyk, who went from a fringe guy to a starting goaltender in the Vezina discussion. So it's a situation that I think could work out really well. I think they didn't give up too much for a rental goaltender. I think it's a way better situation for Fleury, as the Blackhawks are not a good defensive team. But yeah, like you brought up the Oilers, and it's truly mind-boggling at a certain point that they realistically are going to go into another stretch with Smith and Koskinen, and it's not like there's nobody out there. Like there are so many goalies out there available. Like they wouldn't take the chance on Capo Kakinen for I mean, Jacob Middleton is a somewhat revered defensive player, but the Oilers couldn't give up maybe a slightly higher draft pick to get him or anybody. It's just Kulak's a good move. I like that for them, but it's just such a glaring problem, and it just feels like the old boys club has got like Smith. Smith's like their golden goalie, and they're just so excited to use him no matter what the outside pressure is. It's sad to see a franchise kind of get mishandled time and time again when the solution seems so easy.
Yeah, definitely. It looks like we have a bit of a breaking trade here at the Flames. Looks like they got Ryan Carpenter from Chicago, which is obviously not a huge name compared to the moves we've made or we've seen made, but like obviously looks like the guy that's going to kind of fill in that spot for Brad Richardson. We're still waiting to hear on the return. Friedman just broke it a few minutes ago while we were talking here. So yeah, on Carpenter, it looks like he's just a guy who's he's mostly been a depth role throughout his career. He was part of Vegas's big cup run in 17-18. Like other than that, though, he's just kind of like a bottom six, even bottom line guy. And I don't know, adding another one of those guys definitely won't hurt the Flames. It looks like primarily his focus has always been like defensively. He's got really good defensive numbers, not as much offensively. So I guess we'll wait and see on the return. But my guess, if I had to just pick something right now, like looking at what the Flames have for picks, like I wouldn't be shocked if it's like their fifth this year, and then they're just gonna have a second and a seventh left. Like there's at that point a trade coming this late for a depth guy like that. Like there's really maybe next year's fourth, but like man, I don't really see anything above that in terms of this last second trade for Ryan Carpenter. But do you have any immediate thoughts on it?
Yeah, I honestly hope they wouldn't even go as high as that. Like he's got a lot of, good tangibles. Like you said, he's a right shot centerman, which is, the Flames love those, but he's not providing a lot of offense. He is good defensively. I would hope it's more in kind of the fifth to sixth range. They got Nick Shore for like a seventh round pick a couple of years ago. So I wouldn't be shocked if, we found out they swapped a depth piece as well, but not bad. Like you said, they lost Brad Richardson today, and with how good the Stockton Heat are doing with, the help of their young guys, like it's pretty obvious they're not going to touch anybody at this point of the year. So extra bodies to have around are going to be kind of, like these older depth guys. So fine move. Hopefully it's not too much. I see the Oilers also made a trade for a centerman. Oh, and Max Domi as well.
To the Oilers?
No, Max Domi to the Hurricanes.
Oh, that's interesting. Yeah, it's kind of funny. We're just like scrolling through his, for whatever reason, every year the NHL just
15 minutes past the deadline.
I'm convinced it's like one guy answering phones in New York for the NHL for all these trades, and then like has to pick up about 40 voicemails after 3:00 Eastern, and you get all of these trades that come through for about another half hour. I just never understood why. I know it gets backed up. I know NHL GMs aren't always the most forward thinking of people trying to get in early, but like it still crazes me that every year we get this same thing where there's like 15 trades will suddenly break in about 5 minutes after not really a ton going on during the actual whole deadline day itself. Yeah, I think like you said, with Stockton having as good of a season as you had, like in most years you'd be fine calling somebody up, but like if you can avoid taking pieces off their roster, I know like an AHL playoff run isn't the be all end all, and like you wouldn't like sacrifice the Flames run for the Heat's run, but like if you could have both teams having fully filled out rosters making a run this year, like I think that'll do wonders for the organization kind of down the line. Yeah, other than that, like I didn't think the Flames need to make a huge move today after they already made their two big moves. It doesn't look like, as far as I can tell yet, that they're adding a depth guy on at least on the blue line. It looks like the Sabres are done. Pysyk was one guy the Flames fans had been talking about a bit. Looks like he's staying in Buffalo. So, yeah, I think overall, like, it's kind of been a day that we more or less expected. I guess we're still waiting to hear what the Flames gave up for Carpenter. That's kind of like the last little piece of this. But, yeah, no, other than that, like, I think this is a team that's pretty ready to roll as we kind of get the rest of the season going here. How do you feel about the team as a whole? Like where do you think kind of like let's say there's an injury on like somewhere on the team, where do you think the Flames would have like the biggest hole if someone went down?
Yeah, and like just to touch on like where the Flames are at, I think them not adding another defenseman probably is, such a relief for Oliver Shillington more than anybody else. Like he's the last, 2, 3 seasons, except for last season, like he's come out of the lineup down the stretch for really someone replacement level. And I think it just shows they really have had a lot of faith. I know we criticized him on the Tinderbox and a couple other places. Just he looked very different after his injury there. But honestly, these past couple of games, he's looked right as good as he ever has. Like he's back to playing kind of confident hockey, making fewer mistakes. Yeah, like I'm happy with where the Flames are at. I think like other than maybe an injury to like one of their top 3 forwards, like this team is so deep. Like it's hard to maybe fathom where they have a glaring hole. Because I think if I guess I would say like their top 4 as well. Because I don't know how, like I really like Zadorov and Goodbranson, but like if any one of those top 4 guys were to get injured, like I don't know how much I'd like those two playing more minutes up the lineup with somebody else. So like I guess I would see that as a weakness. I also don't really like Michael Stone playing up the lineup. I guess I would hope Connor Mackey maybe gets another chance to play the left side if they need someone there. I mean, it's not a revelation to say like an injury would be worse in your top guys, but forward wise, they've just built up so much depth, and there's so many good wingers dotted around the like lineup, and really promising AHL guys that could come and play a role if they had to on a scoring line. Like really, there's no huge holes. Goalie wise, we've ranted about Dustin Wolf. If he's had to split the net with Dan Vladar, like that's not a it's not a horrifying situation, but it's not something you want. If he had to back up Markstrom, that's just as good. So yeah, honestly, it's tough to find a huge scary point in this team. I think it's telling that they didn't add another defenseman that they like, who they have in the minors. Forward wise, they added what they had to with losing Richardson, and yeah, overall, it's a team that's built for the playoffs.
Yeah, totally. Just looking here, another trade just came down, like kind of a more noteworthy one. Like the Ducks just traded Raquel to Pittsburgh for a second. Looks like a prospect and a player. And I think that's one we haven't really gotten into yet in terms of like a big trade that's kind of gone down over the last few days was the Hampus Lindholm deal. Like the Ducks are considering they did have their hot start to the season, it looked like they might have had a shot. Obviously, they've fallen out here in the last month or so. I think they're doing selling pretty right. Like with that trade today, it looks like between the Lindholm deal, the Manson deal, and the Delorier deal, along with Raquel, like that's a first round pick, at least like 4 second round picks now. Urho Vakanainen's a decent prospect or a kind of a fringe player with Boston. Drew Hellison, prospect of the Avalanche, and we'll see what obviously they get from Pittsburgh. But like they definitely brought in a quantity of pieces. We'll see how many of them end up being quality pieces. But yeah, for a Ducks team that doesn't look like super far away, like they're adding pieces that'll definitely make them a better team. maybe even a year from now, maybe 2 years from now. Like obviously they lost a bit off their roster, but they got like the big guys there, like Trevor Zegras, like he just looks amazing.
Mhm.
I still don't know what they do with John Gibson in Anaheim. I think that's one interesting thing because he's 28 this year and signed at least through 2027. Like it's just for him, it's one of those things that like, does he want to? Are the Ducks going to be good by the time maybe he starts to decline, or is he still got to put up with a couple more years of just being absolutely shelled there? Because every year he starts out looking like one of the best goalies in the league, and then he just gets shelled throughout the season and kind of regresses to an average at best goalie. So I wonder if we maybe at the deadline this year, maybe we see him get moved. But man, the Ducks, they're accumulating right now, and I think that's something they've obviously needed to do for some time. So we'll see if they actually can turn those, just like with the other teams, turn those picks into anything useful maybe in the summer. Yeah, no, I'm just looking around. Other than that, looks like we're starting to see things wind a little bit. Oh yeah, so it looks like Ryan Carpenter for a 2024 fifth round pick. So the Flames held on to this year's one. Brad Treliving will still have a bit of stuff to do with this year's draft. He only has the 3 picks left, but that's the second pick they've traded from 2024, along with the 7th that went to Seattle for Jarnkrok. So I don't know. I'm not too upset about a fifth round pick 3 years from now. Like I don't know if Carpenter does anything of value this year. I guess it's good. It's like you kind of look at it as like Richardson in the 5th for Carpenter. I think I can live with that. I don't know about you, but for me that seems like a nice enough upgrade to be worth it.
Yeah, no, like that's totally fine. Like a fifth is kind of the higher end where I said I was okay with, but like you said, 3 years down the road, like whatever, that's so in the future. It's not really affecting their cupboards now. I think it's really nice that Brad kind of made the big trades we hoped for. Like he dealt a first and a second, but I believe the Flames still have a second round pick this year, so it's not like they're totally cut out of the top end of this draft, which is nice. Like it's always good to keep being able to add these prospects, and the Flames have been a pretty good team in the second round the last couple of years. Yeah, you never know though. Like I've been looking at some trades in the past where the Flames have just kind of, thrown picks away. So if you remember that Michael Stone trade with Arizona, it was like a week before the 2017 deadline. They sent a third round and a fifth round pick to the Coyotes, which at the time was like Michael Stone was pretty good that year. Like he was worth that thing. They had to give up the fifth round because they re-signed him. But
And
those
like,
two
didn't they
picks,
re-sign him like a day before like
yeah,
free
oh
agency? They
yeah.
could just signed him the next day and been okay. I seem to recall too. Like that. That was one thing that didn't make sense. But sorry, continue. You.
Yeah, no, I thought the same thing where it's like, wow, they really just like wanted to give that pick away. But shockingly, both those picks turned into pretty decent goalie prospects. The Coyotes flipped it to the Oilers, who took Stuart Skinner in 2017, and then the Coyotes changed or flipped the 2018 fifth rounder to the Devils, who took Akira Schmid, who's been one of the best AHL goalies this year. So it's just kind of funny how often Flames draft picks come back to bite them. I know someone threw up on Twitter the other day when the Flames traded for Frederick Modine at like the 2011 trade deadline or something, and the draft pick that went back to Columbus actually was used to take Colin Blackwell, who just went in this trade deadline. So like even the most insignificant draft picks in Flames history somehow always seem to pan out negatively in their favor.
Yeah, totally. I'm just really interested to see kind of what happens with all these picks down the line. Like even the Hamnick trade, like that turned into Noah
Oh,
Dobson. Like that still hurts
yeah.
when you consider kind of how unceremoniously like the Hamnick era kind of ended here. Yeah, I think for the Flames, like giving up a bunch of picks suck, but they seem to have done a pretty good job at kind of hitting on the picks they have made in recent
Mhm.
years. Like they're only going to have 3 this year, so it's going to be a pretty light workload unless they maybe trade guys for more picks this year. Or I don't know. If I was Brad Schliving, I might just trade everything out of this year and take a week off. Honestly, like don't even bother going to Montreal. Yeah, I don't know. I think we're this team looks pretty solidly geared up to make a deep run right now. Like I think they can hang with pretty much anybody in the league right now. Like there's kind of that upper tier of teams right now, like Colorado, like Florida. I would still put Tampa in there, although they kind of slowed down a bit during the
Mhm.
regular season. But that's something they kind of do is that they just come into the playoffs and absolutely run through teams after that. So I don't know. I would say the Flames are kind of like comfortably in that like the very top of like that second tier of teams, but I don't know. I don't think it's a huge gap to see them, or a huge stretch to see them jump into that top tier. And yeah, at this point, it looks like anything short of like the Western Conference Finals would be a disappointing year or a disappointing finish to the year for the team. So yeah, I'm just really excited to see kind of where things wind up as as the season winds down. We start to see them. We start to figure out who they might be playing in the playoffs. Like, it looks like right now, at least it's going to be Nashville. And honestly, that's a team that kind of scares me a bit. Just they have the high end talent of like Roman Josi, like UC Saros, who seems very like the guy primed to turn into a superstar goalie and steal a series or two this year. So I'd really like to avoid playing them if they could. But I don't know. At the end of the day, they're going to have to beat 3 or 4 good teams if they want to win the cup. So it doesn't really matter who they play and when. They just have to beat them. But I would prefer not Nashville, if I'm being honest.
Yeah, and you mentioned like it really seems like these Western teams, like quote unquote, like geared up a lot less than the Eastern teams. Like Colorado definitely made some moves, I think, are in hindsight to their kind of matchup against Calgary. I think they really like to see how they stacked up against probably one of their biggest rivals. They added a big defenseman in Josh Manson. They've added some really nice forward depth in Nico Sturm. Who'd they get today?
Lehkonen today.
Lehkonen, yeah. Like they've added some pretty good depth pieces. Like Ryan Callahan probably foolishly was on a segment today saying he thought the Flames were deeper and better than the Avalanche, and an hour later the Avalanche have added some more really solid pieces. Other than that, you're right. Like it doesn't really matter who the Flames are going to match up with at this point. It'd be nice if some of these middling teams either fell off or went hot, so we could kind of solidify who's in and who's out. It would really. Would you like to face Vegas first round? Like,
No, not at
no,
all.
yeah.
Like, I don't know. I'm looking at like when you look at the teams kind of on that bubble right now. Like, if I had to kind of rank like the top, maybe like do like a 1 through like 4 or 5 of those bubble teams I'd want to play. Like, I honestly think Edmonton would have to be like that top team in terms of like who I'd want to play around that bubble. But it looks like they're getting pretty comfortably into that third spot now. They've won 5 in a row. They're 2 points up on Vegas with games in hand. So
They're
like,
getting some good guys back too.
yeah. So I would almost say like maybe Dallas out of all of them, although Dallas always seems to play the Flames tough as well. Like, there's not really an ideal matchup in there. Like, I think Vancouver at this point would have been it, but they're pretty much out of it. I don't think Winnipeg's climbing back in either. Like, they're just
Winnipeg really felt like they sold today. Like they got rid of Kopp, they got rid of like a couple other pieces. Like it feels like they
yeah.
kind of more or less threw in the towel today as well.
Yeah, I don't know. Vegas, like, depends if Mark Stone's suddenly 100% when game 1 of the playoffs hit, I would say. Because, like, right now they look very beatable, but if Stone's back, that would really suck if the Flames had to take on a full power Vegas team in the first round, get knocked out. But
Yeah.
yeah, I don't know. I would say Dallas is probably the team on that kind of bubble I'd like to see, but even the gap between the second wild card and the first wild card is pretty big now. Like, it looks like it's either going to be Nashville or maybe Minnesota. And well, I guess the Blues are right there as well, so it could be one of those central teams. And I don't know, even with Fleury, I think I'd still have to lean towards the Wild in the playoffs. Like, I think the Flames showed a lot of weaknesses on that Wild team kind of in their 2 matchups early this year, and I don't really know that they did all that much to solidify. Like, if you look at the trades they made, like, they got Fleury, they got Middleton, who I think is okay on the Sharks, but I don't think he's amazing. And then, like, I don't know. I think it would probably have to be the Wild out of all those kind of in between teams that I would want to play. But of course, I'll say that they'll play the Wild, like, because we all want to play the Avalanche in 18,
Exactly.
19, and then a guy by the name of Cale Makar just comes onto the scene, absolutely wrecks the series for the Flames. So I don't know. Well, I'm excited to see whoever they play. Like, I'm at this point, I'm just ready for playoff hockey. We still have 20 games left, but they're getting pretty comfortable on top of the Pacific here. So I don't know. I'm just ready for them to get into the playoffs and see how they do.
Yeah, like I think LA is obviously going to make the playoffs too, but I don't think they're solidified as the number 2 spot either. I could see them getting leapfrogged and falling into a wild card spot. It's kind of crazy how early like the Eastern side has been set. Like the playoff teams have been known in the East for like 3 or 4 months now. Like the cutoff's been so obvious. Like it's almost not good at a certain point.
Yeah, it's not even like close to a race in the East. Like, it's 8 very good teams and 8 very bad teams. Like, I think the closest team is like 13 points away. Like, and And it's been that way, like you said, pretty much since, like, you could probably tell that by like American Thanksgiving, like when it was pretty much settled. So I don't know, it's different out there. They're all just jockeying for position right now. Meanwhile, in the West, like, at least there's a few races, but even that, it's not crazy out here either this year. Like, the divisions are pretty solidified, I would say.
Yeah.
LA is going to be an interesting one. Like, I think Doughty, they said, is still going to be out for a little while. So we'll kind of see where the Kings settle in, because they're still
Yeah.
a young team at the end of the day. They're still poised maybe to fall back a bit. Like, they're only 4 points up on Vegas, same number of games played. Like, Edmonton's only 2 points back, 2 games in hand. Like, it's gonna get messy. I think these kind of, once you get past Calgary and Colorado in the West, it could really be anybody like 3 through 10 this year. It feels like.
Yeah, San Jose is like the 2018 Flames, where like they're very clearly not going to make the playoffs, but like all their moves were like almost bolstering their lineup. They re-sign Hurdle, they add a goaltender in Kakinen, like just out of all the teams that are still kind of in that like I think San Jose is far and away out of it, but like contrary to other years, like Vancouver, I think by giving up Mott, like he's a big depth piece. They keep Miller and stuff, but I don't think Vancouver has any realistic expectations of making a serious playoff push. That I know this kind of how our podcast goes, but like, how did you interpret that Halak and Boudreau interaction the other night in the Flames and Canucks?
I didn't actually catch that. Could you
Oh, it was. Oh yeah, no
give us
worries.
a bit
It
of
was
background on it?
like before the end of the second period. There's like a clip where the Canucks are all headed back to the Canucks room, and Halak is still sitting on the bench, and Boudreau with just a very condescending look, like tells Halak he's going in for the third period, and he just looks like bewildered that he's being put in and like really downtrodden, and it just seemed like such a toxic like Wah-esque interaction, like. And then, like they were saying on the broadcast, like the main reason he's disappointed is because he was going in, like he didn't get that start against Buffalo the other night, and I think Thatcher Demko's played like 19 straight games or something for the Canucks. Like Halak is just having a miserable time, and just seeing like an interaction like that between like a really veteran guy. Like I wonder how much is there. Like that's just. I know Vancouver Canucks fans seem to really like Boudreau, given that he's given them the typical coaching change boost, but he does not have a good track record of like dealing with players, and it's just Halak's not a guy they probably care that much about, but with how many Canucks have struggled this year, I wonder like how much of a bad locker room situation is going on in BC.
Yeah, it feels like to me, it kind of feels like they're similar to last year's Flames, where they're just going to need an off season to kind of gut out some of the pieces that weren't working, like get the coach to really like settle in with his strategies, with his give him a full training camp. Like they could, I wouldn't be shocked if next year we come back and we see Vancouver as like a top three team in the
Mm-hmm.
division. Like they still have a lot of very good pieces, but yeah, it just felt like a year where, like, again, like the Flames last year, where they kind of felt like maybe they were going to climb back into it once they got the new coach going, but it might have just been they were too far down for too long. Like, they're not mathematically out of it, but it feels like for all intents and purposes, they're
Mm-hmm.
pretty out of it. And for Halak, it's too bad because it kind of sucks because he thought he was going to go there and kind of be that good backup for them, and he's just had a horrendous year. His goals against is like a 3.4, which is just ugly. And he, even though he wasn't too bad in Boston the last couple of years, like it kind of felt like it'd be a good ad for the Canucks. But yeah, it looks like again Vancouver's gonna have to go a different route for a backup, which I don't know. I have more faith in them actually doing some smart moves this offseason now that Jim Benning's gone. Like that whole mess was just
Mm-hmm.
weird. Like I still don't know why they got Braden Holtby a couple years ago and then it turned around and bought him out. Like I'm just looking, like his buyout for next year's gonna be $1.9 million. Like I don't get what the plan was in Vancouver under Benning. I don't know if he got it either. Like he just,
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. I think the Canucks though, like they'll have a bit of cap space this offseason. We'll see what they do with like Brock Besser and stuff, but they have a decent group of players there, and I wouldn't be surprised if they kind of climbed into that top three next year. So yeah, I'm feeling pretty happy with the Flames right now though. Enough about like the rivals, but
Mm-hmm.
yeah, I'm looking forward to kind of winding down the season here and kind of, I don't know, one thing I did want to touch on with you was how did you feel with the line combinations in Vancouver the other
Mm-hmm.
night? Like it kind of was a bit of a surprise to see just all three top lines were different, including them mixing up the top line for the first time this year. But at least for me, like it just seemed to click right in. I don't know how you felt on it.
Yeah, like I had kind of that blasphemous thought a couple of games ago, like just watching Kachuk and Gaudreau with the puck, like both of them are like highly skilled enough in puck control, like they control the puck well enough that they both, I think, can kind of run their own lines as wingers. And lo and behold, a couple games later, like both of them are split up. I thought it was really interesting actually that Kachuk still played right wing even when he was split up from Gaudreau. But I mean, like, how good did Dylan Dubé look for the first time in forever? How good did Michael Backlund look for the first time? Like, I really liked those lines. And like, honestly, if this whole thing is kind of just a bait and switch to kind of make teams forget about how good those original three guys were together, like until they put them back together in the playoffs, let's say, like, say they were to do that, like, I think that's fine too. But spreading your talent out like that, I mean, they looked really good. I think Tyler Toffoli can only be good as well as he's played with better line mates. And like I said, Matthew Tkachuk just elevated two really mediocre looking players so far this year to like they look just as good as the top line the other night. So, I mean, spreading your talent out like that, it would be nice to see, Monahan and Lucic maybe play just a tiny bit better. That fourth line still feels like just too much of a liability with some guys who aren't great puck handlers, but I really liked it. I didn't think I had no problem at all splitting that top line up.
Yeah, me either. I thought it was interesting to have kind of three lines with each line having a 30 goal score with
Mm-hmm.
Mangiapane, Lindholm, like Kachuk, like that felt like the depth this team kind of needs to have. I think we still maybe see the top three go back together at some point. Maybe just like I don't know, the equivalent of like when Edmonton puts Draisaitl and McDavid
Mm-hmm.
together in like the third period game, just something to go kind of all in. But man, if they can have those three lines clicking like that, like which line do you put like your checking line against when you're playing the Flames? Like there's enough depth scoring in all those facets that like I really wonder how you even kind of game plan to shut them down, because it really feels like all three
Mm-hmm.
lines could have stretches where they're being dangerous against you.
Yeah,
I
it
guess
was.
the other, go ahead, sorry.
So I was just gonna say, like, I don't know if like Sutter was just running kind of normal lines because the power plays were kind of weird times, but he put some very bizarre power play combinations out as well. What'd you think of those?
I don't know. I'm all in for him trying. Like I think we've seen a few times now where like Zadorov has suddenly had power play minutes of late, which is just interesting because he is like subtly decent at handling the puck. Like you wouldn't
Mhm.
expect it, but there's a few times, like maybe like once a game, he'll try and like stick handle from like the flame zone all the way into the attacking zone. And usually he'll do it successfully, which is interesting. I don't know. I like Sutter kind of. I think again, he's probably going to use maybe the next 10, 15 games to try some stuff out and then really find the playoff lines he wants and probably roll with those for the final like 5 to 8 games of the
Mhm.
season. Um, yeah, I think it's nice to see him like playing around a bit with the lines. Like I think that's the nice thing with this Flames team is there's a lot of like players that can play multiple positions. There's a lot of different types of players too, so you can try different things to find some chemistry. I guess this is one thing we do need to talk about with Carpenter being added. Like, do you think he comes right into the lineup with the Flames? Like, you kind of look at the 12 they had in. Like, the fourth line last game was Lucic, Monahan, Lewis. Like, I don't know exactly who's going to take out. Like, are they going to finally say like we're taking out Monahan and throwing in Carpenter as the
Mhm.
fourth center? Like, I think that's going to be a question to kind of watch here. Or do you think we just see like I don't know. I find it hard to believe they just acquired Carpenter to scratch him a bunch, but they did lose Richardson, so maybe they're just like upgrading that kind of 13 spot. I don't know what your thoughts are there.
Yeah, like any other year, I think like Carpenter like immediately comes into the lineup just because he shoots right, but like they have so many right-handed shots right now, it is kind of hard to see where he fits in. Like, do you think like Sean Monahan gets any benefit from like maybe playing like left wing, like taking Lucic's spot? Because really, like the only with like if Dubé finds his game and stays in the lineup, like really the only two guys that have a chance of coming out are Monahan and Lucic, and like Monahan and like either of them maybe not even because like Trevor Lewis can't even come out of the lineup. It's hard to see where he fits in with how Michael Stone's been deployed this year and stuff. Like it's not hard to like believe he'd just sit in the press box for these last 20 games and then be fine with that. But yeah, it's a stacked lineup from the perspective of how the coach feels about a lot of these guys. Like it's hard to see them coming out of where they're situated.
Yeah, totally. Like I think at this point, Trevor Lewis has pretty much earned his full-time lineup
Hmm.
spot. Like, and then I don't know. It's hard to see them taking like Monahan, who he still has an A on this team. Like he's still probably a bigger piece of the leadership core, or like Lucic, who's also kind of one of those like leaders on the team
Hmm.
too. So maybe we just see some guys kind of rolling in and out as they kind of get ready for the playoffs. Maybe giving some other guys some rest, regardless of where they sit in
Yeah.
the lineup as we kind of go down here. Like Sutter has said multiple times that like this schedule is borderline illegal in the final like half of the season here. So I wouldn't be shocked if we just see them almost resting guys and plugging in like Carpenter, even Richie, just to kind of
Hmm.
get these guys like enough rest they need. Like some of these road trips and stuff or back to backs are going to add up real quick. And you want these guys at 100% going into the playoffs. Maybe that's what we see. And
Hmm.
I'm on board with that. But yeah, other than that, I don't see like an obvious spot for Carpenter just based on what they have now, unless they're really not happy with like Monahan or Lucic, like you said.
Hmm. Yeah, no, it's nice to be talking about this at a certain point where guys are earning their spots to the point where we have to, kind of it's hard to fathom them coming out. Like that's a great spot to be in.
Yeah, totally. I'm just looking to see if there's anything else kind of interesting for like the late breaking news. Like it looks like Tree Living's like going to speak in the next 10 or 15 here, so that probably would indicate they're about done.
Or that Oilers center was Derek Brassard.
For a
So
fourth, it looks like
yeah.
too, which like I don't know, Ken Holland's going to Ken Holland, I
Although
guess.
the Max Domi deal looks kind of bizarre too. Looks like it was a three-team swap or something.
With Florida as the other team, which
Yeah.
is interesting too. Like that's it looks like it's a messy deal, and they're probably not going to have it out for a little while. But
Yeah.
and Max, it's always something going on with Max Domi. It feels like when he's dealt. So
Yeah, they
yeah,
absolutely rehabbed Vincent Trocheck though, so we'll see if, how that works for the Hurricanes.
well, the Hurricanes just extended Kotkaniemi to his 8-year deal too. So it's just man, if there's one team like you can never really get a full read on, it's the Hurricanes because like
Yeah,
just ever since they've had the new ownership take over, it's just been a totally like different team,
inconsistent.
and we'll see if they actually can get anywhere, make a deep run this year. But man, it's there's always something entertaining going on in Carolina. I'll give them credit there. But yeah,
Yeah.
other than that, I don't know unless you've got kind of anything else you want to cover off here. I think we've gone probably pushing close to about an hour now. So, if there's anything else you want to kind of jump on here real quick before we head out? Anything Flames? Anything upcoming? Anything in the past? Or
Yeah, no, I can't think of anything. So yeah, I think we'll leave it off there. Thanks for listening, watching. This will be up on YouTube later today. I think we've kind of timed ourselves here as to when this was recorded, but yeah, thank you.
sounds good. All right, have a good night, everyone. And yeah, I guess the Flames are back at it this week. And yeah, here home stretch, 20 games left. Let's see what happens.